last discussion that we had in Unit 2, we talked about the marketing communication process, and we also discussed some of the requirements for the communication to be effective. Now we are moving over to the various communication platforms that we have. I hope you remember our discussion about what marketing mix is. This is something that we have discussed in marketing management. Now marketing mix consists of product, price, place and promotion, and within marketing mix we have got promotion, and promotion mix consists of these 5 platforms. How you can communicate about your product to the customer, how you can promote your product among the customers: advertising, sales promotion, personal selling, direct marketing and public relations. So we'll be touching upon all of them in brief, and as far as this particular subject is concerned, in the first 3 units we'll be discussing advertising management, and in the 4th and the 5th unit we'll be talking about the personal selling, right? So this is what we are going to do in this particular subject, though we would also be touching upon the other 3 aspects: the public relations, the direct marketing and the sales promotion in brief. Now let us talk about the process of developing an effective communication campaign, of an effective promotional campaign. So this is the process. You first have to identify the target audience. Once the target audience has been identified, the target audience is the receiver of the message, for whom you are sending across the message, for whom the message is intended. Then you determine the objective, what you are going to achieve through this communication process, what is going to be the goal of this particular communication. So that objective has to be determined, the message then has to be designed, then the communication channel has to be decided, because once the message has been designed, you will have to send it across using some communication channel, some communication media. So it could be the print media, it could be the electronic media. So that particular communication channel, or it could be a mix of different media. It could be print as well as broadcast as well as outdoor media. So whatever media mix you are going to use, that has to be decided in this 4th step, right? And then you also establish the budget that you will have to, that you have access to, how much money you can spend, because naturally when you are going for promotion you will have to spend some money. So how much money is available to you, how much budget is available to you, how much budget has been made available to you by the organization. So that has to be taken into account. For example, if I do not have a lot of budget, then naturally I may not be able to go for television advertising, which is going to be a relatively costly affair. Fine. So it depends on what kind of budget you have. So you have to assess how much budget has been allocated to you, and based on this particular aspect, in the light of this particular aspect, you decide the marketing mix, you decide the promotion mix instead. Apart from marketing mix, you also have to decide the promotion mix. So as to how much you are going to spend in advertising, how much you are going to spend in sales promotion, how much you are going to spend in personal selling or direct marketing, that has to be decided here. Once these decisions have been taken, now the next job for you will be to implement them. Please understand that all these 6 are still in the deliberation stage. They are not getting implemented. The implementation is taking place here. So you have to basically implement whatever you have decided in these first 6 steps. So whatever target audience has been decided, whatever communication objective has been determined, whatever message has been designed, whatever the communication channel is that you're going to use, whatever the money that is available to you to spend on your communication efforts, and whatever the marketing mix and the promotion mix that you are aiming at, then all these things have to be implemented. So whatever has been decided here, that has to be implemented here. And once the implementation has happened, you will also measure the result, because in management, you know, we tend to measure almost everything that we do, because we know if something cannot be measured, it cannot be improved upon. So you keep on measuring the result, keep on assessing the results to find out whether your efforts are bearing fruits or not. So measurement of result, and naturally based on the results that you are getting, you might want to change the implementation mode a little bit depending on the variation in what you are trying to achieve and what you are achieving. So what your actual results are and what your expected results are, what is the deviation between the two, this will lead as a feedback. This will be a feedback for the implementation process, and that is why we are also assessing the results. Fine. So this is a step. Now what is going to be the agenda in the session that we are going to have today and the two forthcoming sessions? We will be discussing each of these steps in detail, right? So let us start today with the first step, which is identifying the target audience. Whom are you targeting with your communication message, with your promotional message? Number one, naturally it could be the buyers who are buying the product. So naturally you would want to target the buyers. That is the first thing that comes to your mind. Who are you going to target? The buyers. The buyers could be the potential buyers, the current users, and the ex-buyers. Now what is the difference between all of them? Potential buyers are those who have never ever purchased your product, but they might go on to purchase your product in future. So that is why they are potential, possible, probable buyers. Current users are the buyers who have been using your product, but why are you identifying them as target audience? Because you want them to purchase again and again, or maybe you want them to help you find additional customers. So for example, a customer of yours is there who is satisfied with his purchase. He plans to continue with the same product. He plans to continue keep buying your product. But then what do you expect from him? You might want him to refer your product to his friend. So this way you would be able to increase your sales. So this could be the expectation from the current users. So in that case, our target audience would be the current users. And then we have got the ex-buyers. Ex-buyers who have purchased our product earlier, but they probably have now switched over to some other product or some other brand. We might want them to convert back to our product. We might want them to switch back to our product, to our brand. So then these group of buyers could also be our target audience. Then we have got the deciders. Now what is the difference between a buyer and decider? I'll give an example. Let's think of what happens with a 4-year-old child when he decides to, when he is the school going age, he is sent to a particular school. Now who decides which particular school is he going to be sent to? Is it the child himself or is it the parents? And naturally it is the parents, so they are the deciders. But who is the user of this service? The child is the user of this particular service. So the child is going to the school, he is the user, but the decider is somebody else. And think of a family in a remote village. They are not well educated to decide which particular school they are going to send their children to. Don't you think they probably would want advice of somebody who is more learned, who is more educated? So they may go to the employees, to the manager of the local bank branch, and they may ask him for advice. Where should I send my child to? Which particular school should I send my child to? Now in this particular case, please understand, who is making the ultimate decision? The ultimate decision is still being made by the guardians, the parents. The user is the child, but the influencer is the bank branch manager, because his advice is going to influence what the guardians are ultimately going to do, which particular school they are ultimately going to send their children to. Is this fine? So here the roles are very, very different. It could so happen that there are 2 or 3 different peoples playing different roles. One, for example, in this particular case, the child was the user, the guardians were the deciders, while the influencer was the bank branch manager. However, it could also happen that all these 3 roles are played by one same individual. In many cases it happens, for example, which particular brand of chocolate you are going to use. You probably decide it on your own, you consume it also, and many a times nobody else is influencing your decisions, so you yourself are the influencer as well. So this could also happen. So there could be different types of target audiences. So deciders, and that is why deciders are very important, because though they are not using the product, but ultimately they are going to decide which particular brand of product is going to be purchased. For example, Johnson's baby soap, who is going to decide which particular brand of soap is being used for a newborn baby? Ultimately it's generally the mother. So the mother is the decider, and that is why it's very important to target your communication efforts on mothers. Then we've got the influencers. I was talking about influencers again. Why influencer? Because they influence the decision. Fine. So that is why we talk about the influencers also, right? And that is why, for example, many insurance agents, many insurance firms, what do? To sell their product, what do? They convince the branch managers, because they know whenever the villagers have to purchase these kinds of financial products, they would certainly first seek advice from the branch managers, from the bank managers. So they go and influence the bank branch managers, so that whenever these villagers come to these bank branch managers for advice, these bank branch managers may suggest them their product or their brand or their service. Is this okay? So this again has to be identified. Many a times the target audience is not a particular individual, it is the whole general public. You are trying to promote, you are trying to communicate to the general public. Some of them, they may not at all be your purchasers, but you are still trying to promote to them. For example, Intel, you know that it has been selling chips, and Intel is basically a B2B company, because it is selling chips to hardware manufacturers. So it might be selling its chips to Intel, INTL, it might be selling its chips to the computer manufacturers. So ultimately, basically it's operating in B2B market. So there is no, that generally it does not make sense for Intel to advertise its product to the general public, because in any case you are not going to go to the market and buy Intel chip, for example. They are selling in the B2B market, they are operating in the B2B market. They might be selling to HP, they might be selling to Acer, they might be selling to Dell, and Dell would then further sell the computer, the whole computer system to the customer. So it does not make sense for Intel to go and advertise to the customers. However, Intel still does this. Why? Because they are trying to target the whole public. They are trying to target the general public, and the idea is that they should create a conviction among the general public that Intel stands for good quality products. Fine. So that is the whole idea. So here the target audience is not a particular user or a buyer, because in any case the general public is not going to buy. You do not go and buy Intel. The target audience is the general public, right? Now these could be individuals, buyers, deciders, influencers, while the general public can also be there. So we are also possibly targeting the whole public. Now let us talk about the communication objectives that are possible, the ones which you can focus on, what basically you might be looking forward to achieving through your communication process. So what are the various possible communication objectives that you are trying to meet, that you are trying to achieve through your promotional campaigns? So let's talk about these three different types of objectives that we have. The cognitive objective. Cognitive means something which has relation to how we think and learn. So that is what cognitive is. COGNITIV, right? How people learn, how people think. So it has to do with the thinking aspect, right? The rational aspect, RATIONAL. Rational aspect, thinking. Now cognitive is basically about thinking aspect, and one of the objective could be to achieve some learning, to make people think about your product, to make people aware about your product. They should know that your brand is there, which is, the term is known as brand recognition. They should be able to know, they should be able to tell that your brand is also operating in this particular market. So you want them to be aware of the presence of your brand in a particular market. For example, let's say you come up with a new brand of candles, Dhwaj candles, so people should be aware. So you have to make them aware that okay, there is a particular Dhwaj brand of candles. You have to then, possibly you may want them to know in depth about what kind of product Dhwaj candles are, who is the manufacturer, where is it being manufactured, what all attributes does it have. So that knowledge aspect can also be another objective of yours. And then conviction. Conviction is that the customer is now convinced that the Dhwaj brand of candles is much better than any other brand of candles in the market. So these all are cognitive objectives, because they have to do with the learning aspect of the customer, learning aspect of an individual. They have to do with the thinking aspect, right? So that is called the cognitive aspect. Now we have got the affective aspect also. So up till now you are trying to achieve these objectives. You are trying to make people aware that you exist as a brand. You are trying to make them, you were trying to increase their knowledge level about your brand, and then you were trying to convince them that your brand is better than other brands in the market. So you were trying to build this conviction among them. But now we are moving on to affective. Affective has to do with feelings, how we feel, right? And please understand, feelings do not originate in heart, contrary to what you have been reading and probably listening to. मेरा दिल भी कितना पागल है, ये प्यार तो तुमसे करता है. Actually there is nothing like a dil involved here. It is basically even the feelings they originate in the brain, right? So here we are trying to do something with the feeling part, how the customer feels about my product. So here we were only talking about how he thinks about our product, what he thinks about our product, what he knows about our product. But here we are talking about how he feels, whether he likes my product or not, whether he prefers my product over other products in the market or not. Now this is the affective part, right? So we've got the cognitive part and we've got the affective part, and then we have the behavioral part. So it is all right to have a particular thinking about a particular product, to have a particular knowledge about a particular product and to feel about a particular product, but then what about any action towards that particular product? So this is the behavioral part basically, right? And in behavioral part, we might want our target audience to try our product. We might want our target audience not to just try but to purchase our product. We might want our target audience to advocate our product. What do we mean by advocating a particular product? For example, if you go and tell somebody else that okay, Department of Business Administration, they are running the BBA course and the quality of teaching is good and the quality of other inputs is good, and you are trying to advocate it to, let's say, your younger sisters or maybe a friend of yours, so that he or she may also take admission into this particular course. Now this is what advocacy is. So you want your existing customers who are satisfied with your product or brand to advocate it to the others, to create to spread a good word of mouth about your product. Now this is what advocacy is all about. So there could be different objectives that you can have. So it could be the cognitive objectives like increasing awareness, telling people about your brand and convincing them about the attributes of your brand, to make them like your brand or prefer your brand over the other brands in the market, to make them try out your brand, to make them purchase your brand, and to make them share good information about your brand, favorable information about your brand. So these different objectives could be there, and now we have basically grouped these objectives into the cognitive, affective and the behavioral categories, right? Now let us talk about the response hierarchy models. Okay, I hope you see these arrows, and these arrows basically are depicting a particular process. And now please understand, now have a look at this first column, the cognitive component. I hope now you remember the thinking part, the affective component, the feeling part, and the behavioral component, how he or she acts towards your brand. So we have discussed all these aspects now. Now there are different models which have been suggested by different researchers, and please understand there is no particular model which has universal acceptability. So we are discussing the four. There are only few models which are considered to be closer to reality, how people think about a particular product and how people actually behave towards a particular product. So we are only going to discuss 4 or 5 of them. So here we are going to discuss 4 of them. So response hierarchy models, we have got different response hierarchy models. This is called the AIDA model, AIDA model. Why? Because we are going to talk about 4 stages here: attention, interest, then desire, and then action. I hope you understand this. What do we mean by this? First, you have the customer who will first attend to your promotional campaign. He'll first have a look, he'll first pay attention. Once he pays an attention, then he'll feel interested towards your product, and then he'll start desiring your product. So it is a greater level of interest. So interest, when increases, it becomes desire. Now he is not just interested in product, but he desires to have your product, and then he indulges in some kind of an action, maybe purchasing that particular product. So attention, interest, desire, action. That is why this particular model is known as AIDA model. Now I hope you remember why we are actually grouping them into these 3 different categories. Now attention is basically a cognitive component, affective component, the feeling part is interest and desire, while the behavioral part is when he actually does something towards the product, is here the action. And that is why we are showing these 3 different categories. Now if you talk about hierarchy of effects model, another model which has been suggested, it says that basically there are 6 stages. First is awareness, then the customer is first aware of the existence of a product or a brand, and then he increases his knowledge level about that particular brand, then he starts liking it, then he starts preferring it. Liking brought to an extreme is preference. Now liking is he likes A and he likes B also, but preference is he likes only A, he likes A more than B. And conviction is now that he has a deep-seated belief that this particular product is the most suitable product for me. Now this is conviction. Then finally the purchase. Now again these 2 have been clubbed as the cognitive component, the thinking aspect. These 3 have been clubbed as the affective component, the feeling aspect, and now this is the behavioral component, where actually some action is taking place, the purchase, right? Now these are various models which have been suggested by researchers, and they have widespread acceptability, right? Now innovation adoption model. Now this is a model which has been suggested by researchers, and it actually talks about what all stages a particular customer goes through when he adopts an innovation. Now what do we mean by innovation? Innovation is something new. It could be a new product in the market, it could be a new technology in the market. For example, smartwatches, wearable watches which also keep a tab on your bodily parameters, for example heartbeat and how much kilometers, how many kilometers you are walking, or maybe your pulse rate and all that stuff. So this is called the wearable watch. Now this, I hope you know that this is a technology which has emerged very recently. Now this is what we mean by innovation adoption. For example, how people take to this new product, this new technology, how quickly do they adopt, what all stages do they go through while adopting this new technology in the market. So the first stage could be awareness of the existence of this new technology, then there is some interest, and then they evaluate this technology with the existing ones, and then they try out, and once they are satisfied in the trial, they adopt that particular technology. So this is how some new innovation in the market is adopted. So first of all, you are being aware of that particular product, and let's talk about, there are so many examples. For example, this probably happened with you when you started using WhatsApp for the first time. You were aware of the technology, somebody made you aware of the technology, somebody made you aware about WhatsApp, and then you started having interest, then you evaluated it with whatever other options you had till that point of time, and then you tried it, and then once you are satisfied, you adopted it, which means you started trying it on a more regular basis. So this happens in case of a new product or technology in the market. Now this is the third model now, and now we are going to discuss the communication model. Now this is a slightly different model. Again, exposure. Here first of all the audience gets exposed to the message, but they may not be paying attention. Then they receive the message, then there is a cognitive response, which means they start thinking about it, right? And then after this cognitive response, they start having an attitude towards that particular product. It could be favorable or unfavorable, and then they start having an intention to buy that particular product or not to buy that product, or to maybe try out that particular product, and then they actually indulge in some behavior, right? Again, these three are basically the cognitive aspects, these two are basically the behavioral aspects, the affective aspects, the feeling aspects, while this is the behavioral aspect, right? So these different models have been suggested. What I was trying to do in this particular slide was to tell you as to which stages in these models belong to the cognitive component, which ones belong to the affective, and which ones belong to the behavioral component. With this, I'll close this session today, and in the two coming sessions that we'll have in this very week, we'll be wrapping up the communication process that we discussed in the very first slide. So we'll be completing that particular process, and we'll be talking about about that particular process, about the various stages in that particular process. Thank you very much for your time today.